my world, did you see Boris Johnson trying to open an umbrella at this ceremony in London? Dude, you live in a country where it rains half the year. Someone send help. We got a lot to cover, but before we do, please hit that subscribe button below and like this video. I love watching the Olympics, in part because I'm consistently impressed with what these athletes do. Like, I'm sitting here with my 5-pound weights, being like, yeah, look at me. And these guys are literally breaking world records. Well, this year's Olympics was kind of like a microcosm of the world's problems. One of the biggest stories is of a Belarusian runner who criticized her coaches for forcing her to run an event she's never done before. So they rushed her to the airport to try and force her to board a flight home. But she went to the police for help because she was afraid she would be severely punished back in Belarus. This is, by the way, just after news of a Belarus activist who helped people flee the country was found dead in a park in Ukraine. So Poland has offered her a humanitarian visa, and her husband and child were able to flee Belarus. Can we just take a step back here for a second? Imagine if you traveled somewhere for work, and then while you were there, you discovered you could never go back home. That's another level. You have to be pretty scared of what's going to happen to you for you to do that. So given all the developments and drama at this year's Olympics, I figured I'd sum it up for you in rhyme. History was made at Tokyo's Olympic Games. A lot of fun was had, but also drama and shame. It's a time for the world to get together and compete. There were wins, challenges, and also big feats. Katie Ledecky made history as an American swimming star. Another U.S. swimmer won 5 gold medals, taking us far. Simone Biles had to withdraw, but then came back like a boss. A transgender weightlifter from New Zealand made history before her loss. In a move that was heartwarming and better than a fist bump, a Qatari and Italian shared a gold medal for the high jump. Sifan Hassan from the Netherlands fell running but finished first. And Team Refugee had athletes from an 11-country burst. China broke a record with the women's team sprint, and Taiwan's anthem played for the first time, hint, hint. But there were also some stories that caused a little burn. A Belarusian runner sought asylum after fearing her return. Russia wasn't officially represented since they pumped steroids into their team. And a Myanmar swimmer stayed home in protest, sacrificing his dream. But fun was had by all and camaraderie won the day. If only it were the same in geopolitics, I would say. North and South Korea said they're gonna build trust and improve ties. And I don't know if it means a new chapter for these guys, but it's still a big deal since the two Koreas have technically remained at war since 1953 when the Korean War ended, but not with a peace treaty. I asked the Geeks what you all thought, and 67% of you said you didn't really think much would come from these talks. But what I found interesting is that they agreed to restore this communication hotline between the two sides that had been cut off by North Korea last summer. Can you imagine what they would discuss, though? 1-800-CALL-KIMMY. Hello, Kimmy here. I'm busy. Kimmy, it's Moon. Did you get my moon pies? Get it? Oh yeah, thanks. I'm on keto though, so I had to give it to the kids. What do you need, Moon? Listen, there's a tree that's on your side of the border whose branches are hanging on my side of the border, and it's really ruining the grass. Oh yeah, no problem. I'll blow you guys up. I mean the tree. I'll blow the tree up. Thanks. You wanna get lunch sometime? Sure, I'll launch anytime. No, I said lunch, not launch. Now I poke fun, but really no one knows what this hotline is for or what would be discussed. So it's hard to see much chance for improvement in ties between the two sides, because in order for there to be progress, North Korea wants sanctions lifted. And in order for that to happen, it would need to stop its nuclear program and stop threatening to unify the two sides under one. Ultimately though, any improvement in ties between the two sides is good news for us all, at least for a little bit. The US announced it would return 17,000 archaeological artifacts to Iraq after they were believed to have been looted. It's actually pretty common for criminals and terrorists around the world to loot cultural artifacts when their countries fall into conflict or when things are lawless, because stealing this stuff can be a big source of revenue. And as you can imagine, the Middle East is full of these ancient artifacts that literally date to biblical times. So what's been discovered over the last few years is that thousands of items here that were purchased legally were in fact originally stolen from these ancient cultural sites. In this case, the majority were stolen by criminals during the Gulf War in the 90s, but some of the items were also recently looted by ISIS. The reason this is such a big deal and why I wanted to talk about it is because for years and years, countries like Iraq and Egypt and Greece have been asking for their stolen cultural artifacts to be returned. And it's always kind of awkward because museums or collectors that have paid millions for these items through dealers don't want to return them. So for the US to make this announcement and lead on this is pretty cool. Now, other museums that have been accused of holding looted items have responded. Listen, it's a pretty shitty situation to be in when you find out that you gotta return something you paid for. But ultimately, buyers and auction houses need to do their due diligence and learn better where the artifact originally comes from before buying it at all. After people in Tunisia protested against the lack of economic opportunity and bad quality of life there, Tunisia's president suspended the parliament, which would basically be like President Biden telling Congress they can't meet until he says so. And he fired the prime minister and consolidated power in his hands. He also arrested some parliamentarians, and he says he has no interest in becoming authoritarian, but he's done some moves that smell a little dictatory. Like when the police shut down Al Jazeera's office, summoned a New York Times reporter, and arrested some folks who criticized the government. Now what's interesting is the Tunisians seem pretty happy with the president's moves, so they stopped protesting, and they're hopeful that all this will result in what they want most, which isn't really democracy, but good wages and a comfortable lifestyle. Tunisia has only been a democratic country for the last 10 years, so its democracy is super fragile. In fact, it's the only country from the Arab Spring that came out democratic. And when I was at the White House, we used to look at Tunisia as the only potential success story. So it's kind of sad that they may be tipping backwards. The president is a former constitutional law professor who has compared himself to Abraham Lincoln. Would we go that far? And he said he needed to take all these measures to ultimately help Tunisia. At the end of the day, people there just want to be able to earn a normal wage and not live in poverty and corruption. So hopefully the president will address their concerns without going down an authoritarian path. It's been exactly a year since the mass explosion in Lebanon that killed 217 people, injured 7,000, and displaced 300,000. This blast is the third largest explosion in history after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So what did the Lebanese government do in the year since? Nothing. Literally nothing. Families still have no answers as to what happened that day, and the judges appointed to the investigation have as much turnover as the prostitutes in the politicians' beds. You know I tell it like it is. Authorities dismissed the first judge after he summoned political figures for questioning, and the current judge has also tried to summon high-ranking officials, but hasn't been able to since they've all been granted immunity. Leaked documents show that Lebanese military and security authorities warned about the danger of the nearly 3,000 tons of ammonium nitrate sitting at the port at least 10 times, but no action was taken. For example, the Lebanese president knew but said it wasn't his fault since he expected the port authorities to do something about it. I mean, I don't think these guys get it. They're murderers and should be tried for the murder of over 200 people. All this while Lebanon's economy has been in an utter freefall. And rather than make the needed reforms to get international aid packages, the government refuses to change and continues to line its pockets. I asked you all what grade you would give the Lebanese government, and 87% of you said it was worse than failing. Lebanon needs an independent investigation into this mess, or we will never have answers. And in the meantime, humanitarian aid like the $100 million the US will be giving is critical. For their incompetence and their criminal negligence, the Lebanese government and all of its former and current officials who had anything to do with this blast and with Lebanon's miserable economy are on my shit list this week. If any of you are interested, here's a list that I'll also share on social media of some of the charities doing amazing work in Lebanon while the government sits on its hands. I'm sticking with my NBA theme because I'm crushing on Enes Kanter, who just announced he's going back to the Boston Celtics. He's been hosting free basketball camps across the country this summer in areas where they aren't accessible or affordable. And he says his goal is just to put a smile on a kid's face. So Enes Kanter is awesome in general, but he also has a fascinating background being from Turkey while also being a public critic of Turkey's government. He uses his platform to highlight the repression and human rights abuse by Turkey's President Erdogan and has worked with Congress to release political prisoners there. So because of this, the Turkish government revoked his passport and has accused him and his family members of being terrorists. His NBA games have been censored in Turkey, and he's afraid to leave the US because he could get arrested since Turkey put his name on Interpol's list. In fact, here's a crazy story for you. He went to Indonesia where he was hosting a basketball clinic, and his passport was canceled while he was traveling from Indonesia to Romania. So he lands in Romania and is denied entry and told the Turkish government had a warrant for his arrest. Now, luckily, the US government and NBA intervened, and he was able to return to the US. After that, though, the Turkish government arrested and detained his father in Turkey for 5 days. And if you think this is an issue isolated to Turkey, then think again. 2 years ago, Enes was holding one of his free basketball camps at the Islamic Center of Long Island, and the Turkish consulate in New York threatened the mosque if it hosted the clinic, so they canceled it. So now Enes is basically stateless. He hasn't been back to Turkey in years, or spoken to his family members there who had to publicly disown him for their own safety. And even with all the threats he faces, he keeps giving back and fighting for what's right. Enes, if you want to come on the show, you call me. Thanks, geeks. We covered a lot. Before you go, please hit that subscribe button below and like this video. And if you have any questions, feedback, or stories you want me to talk about, please leave a comment or reach out to me directly on social media. Stay fabulous.